So we will be starting shortly. Good afternoon. Just giving a few more seconds, not minutes really, for all participants to log in. It is a fine balance between giving time to participants to come on, but also get on with the session because we have so much and interesting content to go through. So, in light of this, we might make a start and participants can continue joining us. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our session today. So, before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which we work and live. I pay my respects to elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. As a language professional myself, I recognize that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples are the original communicators and storytellers of this land. So I honor the enduring strength and diversity of First Nations languages, the first languages of this continent, and the role they're playing in maintaining culture, identity, but also connection across generations. So, for those of you that do not know me, my name is Despina Manatiju. I'm a NATI certified interpreter and translator. I'm also the head of interpreting at 2M Language Services, and I have the privilege of co-leading the Interpreter Employment Success Program, or IESP for short, alongside with 2M CEO Tea Dietrich. So, welcome to webinar number 4, Interpreting in Dementia Assessments, Accuracy, Ethics, and Clinical Realities. So before we start with the introduction of today's presenter, I'd like to encourage you to submit your questions and comments using the chat function or the Q&A box. Please also note that AI note-taking tools or external recording applications are not permitted. Auslan interpretation will be provided during the session to support accessibility for all attendees, current and future, since this webinar is being recorded like all of the IESP webinars. We also kindly ask speakers and participants to be mindful of the Auslan interpretation taking place of our interpreter and do so by speaking clearly and at a measured pace to ensure accurate and effective interpretation. I think I'm consistently at fault with keeping pace, so apologies in advance. And now I'd like to introduce you to Professor Bianca Britna, who is our presenter for today. Bianca is a professor of health communication in society at La Trobe University in Melbourne, Victoria. Her disciplinary training is in medical anthropology and public health, and her research expertise is in cultural diversity, dementia, and mental health. Within these disciplinary and contextual boundaries, she has undertaken several studies on dementia prevention, awareness, diagnosis, and care, which are specific to culturally diverse communities in Australia, but also internationally. Bianca has authored over 150 publications, has produced more than 70 multilingual films, comics, and animations, and also generated above 29 million in research income. In recognition of Bianca's research, she has been inducted into the state government of Victoria's Multicultural Honour Roll in 2022. We couldn't think of a better presenter for our webinar tonight. Thank you, Bianca. It is over to you.
Thank you, Despina, for that very warm introduction, and good evening to everybody in Queensland. I'm going to share my screen. I'm very honored to be here to present to you today. So I'll just share that and put it into presenter mode. And maybe Despina confirming that you can see it in presenter mode.
Yes, I can see it. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Okay, so I'm delighted to be here to talk to you about some training that we developed for interpreters on improving communication quality during a cognitive assessment for dementia. It's called a mindset training. Some of you may have heard about this before. I'll be doing a two-part series. One in today's session outlining what the training includes, just giving you a taster and directing you to where you can actually undertake the full session. And the second part of my presentation, which I'll do in a few weeks, will tell you about the research underpinning the training and how we did it, because this is a world first study and it's very groundbreaking in many respects. I'd like to begin by also acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands. For me, I'm coming to you from the Wurundjeri Woi Wurrung people's lands in the Kulin Nation. The work that I'm presenting today is really the culmination of many, many people's efforts, not just my own. There is a large team that sits behind this work that includes people like me, medical anthropology, geriatricians, psychologists, health communicators, as well as, most importantly, the interpreting community themselves. So we were very lucky to have Associate Professor Erica Gonzalez Garcia from RMIT, as well as Dr. Jim Lavach from Monash University on our team. This research and this training has also been developed in consultation and partnership with several different agencies across Australia as well as internationally. I won't go through the whole list. You can see the logos and names over there for your information, and I understand that these slides might be shared after the session as well. This work was funded through the National Health and Medical Research Council, and also included cash contributions from NATI, All Graduates Interpreting and Translation Services, and the Commonwealth Department of Health, Disability and Aging. Curtin University and the University of Western Australia, their respective ethics committees approved different components of the work, and the National Aging Research Institute provided governance approval. Why did we undertake this work? We recognize that dementia affects communication and language. Aphasia or loss of language is a very common symptom associated with dementia. And we know that people who speak a second language or for whom English is their second language, they might lose proficiency in English first before their native or mother tongue. The National Health and Medical Research Council and the My Aged Care Guidelines recommend that when a cognitive assessment for dementia is undertaken with someone who is not proficient in English, then an interpreter, a professional interpreter, be offered, not a family member being used to do the interpretation. As we are an aging nation and an increasingly ethnically diverse one, we have many people over 65 who are showing symptoms of dementia who do not necessarily speak English. Aged care assessments evaluating dementia are undertaken at a rapid rate, and this is growing. We estimate about 40,000 of these assessments get done every year, if not more. I don't need to tell all of you, but I'm sure you've been in these difficult situations before, but dementia presents particular challenges for interpreters. We'll talk through some of those challenges in a minute. And there's no specific training offered, at least until ours came online. And that makes it very difficult because as an interpreter, you are expected to work across so many different settings, from legal to hospital to community to mental health, to a variety of conditions. And you cannot be an expert in everything automatically or intuitively. You need training to be able to do your job to the best of your ability. And without that training being available, it made it very challenging for many interpreters in our communities. So this was really the driving force behind why we wanted to develop this training called Mindset. It is now available for free online. It's self-paced, and it's on the NAATI website. I will share the QR code and the link at the end of the session, and also alert you to some of the PD points you can claim if you choose to undertake the training. We've tried to make the training interactive, so there's multimedia components, practice quizzes, instructional videos. It takes about 4 hours to do, but you can do it over several sessions. It's not, doesn't have to be completed in one session. Today, I'm going to give you a little bit of a taster of what that training includes. I'm trying to condense 4 hours into one. So we will obviously not cover all of the components, but hopefully it'll be enough to sort of pique your interest to do the training. It comprises 5 modules. The first one provides an overview of knowledge of dementia and some of the health and aged care services in Australia, so how the system works. The second module talks a little bit about culture and dementia. The third about briefings and introductions. The fourth about common challenges that may arise during a cognitive assessment and how to tackle some of these common, hurdles that arise. And then the fifth one is around the AUSIT Code of Ethics and how it would be applied during a cognitive assessment. So module 1, we split it into 2 parts. The first part focuses on what is dementia. And the second part is about how the health and aged care system work. So just for your information, dementia is an umbrella condition that refers to a whole suite of behaviors where there is neurodegeneration over time. It does not only affect memory, it affects also executive function, behavior, and everyday interactions and communication. So by the end of the session, we talk about dementia. These are the goals that we anticipate that interpreters will be able to understand and familiarize themselves with. There are over 100 different kinds of dementia. Alzheimer's disease, which many of you might have heard of, is the most common type, but there are also several others, such as vascular dementia and frontotemporal dementia as well. Module 1.2 of the training talks about an overview of Australia's health and aged care system. This is a system and this is a landscape that is rapidly changing. Many of you might be aware of the new Aged Care Act that took effect on the 1st of November 2025. There are whole suites of new regulations and guidelines that are coming into the aged care landscape. And this is rapidly changing how people are working. So it is helpful as interpreters to know how the systems intersect and what your role might be in an aged care assessment, because it's not just about helping to facilitate a timely diagnosis. It might also be about understanding fears that a patient may have, that if they are diagnosed with dementia, that automatically means they will be institutionalized, or that they will be deemed mad, or that there will be a taboo against them in their community. So it's important to understand that this is not automatic, that one can live well with dementia, one can live safely with dementia, one can enjoy a quality of life with dementia. So some of the things that the training covers is about really the medical care that people will require. from diagnosis to treatment and medication, information and care planning. Many people in multicultural communities, many people might have read of new treatments that are coming online for dementia, and sometimes it's misportrayed in the media that it's a cure, and people get excited and they think they will be able to overcome it. Unfortunately, there is no cure for dementia. The treatments that are available may slow it down if it's diagnosed early enough. It may help reduce some symptoms that are problematic, but it's not going to do away with the condition. The other thing that's also important as an interpreter to understand is when you're communicating that diagnosis, with the clinician, that there are supports available to help people age at home and in their communities. And these are services that you access through My Aged Care. And it is important there in that diagnostic communication to understand that maintaining social engagement, pursuing fun activities between family members and the person with dementia, carers taking respite for themselves. These are all really critical things to ensuring that people with dementia live well and that families don't experience burnout. And then finally, the last thing that's really crucial in terms of services for people with dementia are allied health. So maybe they need help with movement or mobility, maybe some therapeutic intervention, podiatry, dentistry, physio, all of these things also come into play. And we do cover off on these components in the training. The second module that the training covers is on culture and dementia, and about taking the need for a person-centered approach. This is a really critical part of the training for interpreters because we understand that there are many languages, the lexicon around the term dementia is pejorative. I will give you some examples. Right. So in India, where I come from, in Hindi, dementia is described as Satyana, gone 60-ish. In Greek, it could be avio, which is madness. And in many other languages, it can translate in a similar way. If you are not familiar with what dementia is and how you might describe it in a non-pejorative way, if you rely on common nomenclature that is used in language, it can be profoundly stigmatizing for the person and their family. It can put them off site. It can put the clinician off site. It can totally derail a consult. But, like I said, if you don't know what the condition is, if you don't have the tools to describe it in a different way, then relying on what is culturally familiar and linguistically familiar is all you've really got in your toolbox. So it is important, therefore, to acknowledge and reflect that in whichever language you are interpreting in, what dementia might be described, commonly described as in those languages, and whether though that description is pejorative, and if so, how we might find other ways to describe it in that language that is going to be less taboo for the patient. So that's some of the challenges that I described there. Belabor the point. The third module that I wanted to talk about is about briefings, which we have interviewed interpreters, clinicians, and managers of interpreting agencies, and everybody talks about the importance of briefings, about the clinician and the interpreter talking to each other prior to going into the assessment, to understand what some of the concerns of the patient and the family might be, to get a sense of what cognitive assessment tool might be used, to benchmark where the interpreter's capability and the clinician's expectation are, and to align those two as well. We also know that briefings don't happen in practice a lot, that time is short, people are busy, and often things are very rushed. This can lead to a lot of miscommunication and missed opportunities between the clinician and the interpreter to build a good therapeutic relationship and rapport. But it is a challenge that we need to address. We do spend some time when we talk about the briefings, that what the interpreter could do to help the clinician in that process. So that they have that coherence between them about what the purpose of the appointment is and how to support that quality and effective communication. In a briefing, we do stress, and I know this is challenging for many interpreters to actually do in practice, but we do stress that a briefing is a good opportunity to, yes, let the clinician lead the briefing between when it's just yourself and them. But if they are relatively new to the space or a little uncertain, or they're not quite sure what to do, it is helpful in that instance for the interpreter to establish the parameters and the scope of what their practice might be and what the clinician expects, so that you can get the best outcome from the assessment. Many a time, clinicians are not trained on how to work with interpreters. They might get 1 hour in their medical degree on cross-cultural education, of which working with an interpreter is a very small component, maybe 15 minutes of training. They're equally in the dark. And often what they learn is what they learn on the job. Whether it's good, bad, it's been done, therefore that's what they do. So I acknowledge that we must also work very hard to upskill clinicians on how to work with interpreters in this space. I'd like to reassure everyone that is the next goal in this project. So we talk about briefings and we talk about introductions. And we talk about why introductions are important also when it involves the patient and their family. So not just prior to, but also during. It helps establish clarification on respective roles. It supports the client in understanding how to use an interpreter and helps establish trust and rapport. Hopefully, it will also minimize the risk of the patient and the family rejecting the interpreter, not wanting them to be present in the session, of them attempting to engage in side talk with the interpreter and excluding the clinician, or of them attempting to exclude the interpreter and answer the clinician in broken English, but also incomplete English. So hopefully it can ameliorate a lot of those things with a good introduction. I do acknowledge that in small communities where people might know each other a fair bit, that it is difficult to, that there is also concern among some patients and family members that they know the interpreter in a personal sense, that they've seen them in their communities, maybe they go to the same church or they have the same social group, etc. But this is also a good opportunity for the clinician and for the interpreter to reassure the patient and their family that they're bound by a code of conduct, a code of ethics to maintain confidentiality. So that also is very important. We did, as part of the training, create quite a lengthy video about what a cognitive assessment looks like, how an introduction should occur, what to do when things go wrong in that assessment. I'm not going to play the whole video for you. It is about 20 minutes long, but I would like to share a little snippet with you to give you a taster of what it is like. So I'm going to hit play, and Despina, I'll rely on you to nudge me if for some reason the sound is not working.
Sure. Yes, thank you.
But anyway, say what you think. Oh, Dad, thank you. Have a seat. Here you go.
Lovely, thank you.
There you go. Great. I'll leave it to it. And if you need anything, I'll just be outside.
Sure, thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you very much for letting us come to your house, Mr. Pappas.
Σας ευχαριστούμε πάρα πολύ που μας δεχτήκατε στο σπίτι σας σήμερα, κύριε Πάπα.
Παρακαλώ.
You're welcome.
My name is Chris and I'm from the assessment service. I'll be asking you some questions about your memory and your thinking. This is Alex. He's the interpreter and he's here to help with the language difference. He'll introduce himself now.
Γεια σας. Είμαι ο Άλεξ, ο διερμηνέας. Θα μεταφράσω ό,τι η Κρίς, η κλινική γιατρός, μόλις σας είπε, χρησιμοποιώντας ακριβώς τις λέξεις που μόλις χρησιμοποίησε. Λοιπόν, το όνομά μου είναι Κρίς και είμαι από την υπηρεσία αξιολόγησης. Θα σας κάνω μερικές ερωτήσεις για τη μνήμη σας και για τον τρόπο σκέψης σας. Θα μεταφράσω όλα όσα λέει η Κρίς για να τα ακούσετε και όλα όσα λέτε εσείς για να τα ακούσει αυτή. Δεν είμαι ειδικευόμενος στον τομέα υγείας, οπότε δεν μπορώ να δώσω συμβουλή σε θέματα υγείας. Επίσης, δεν θα μοιραστώ με κανέναν τις πληροφορίες που εσείς μας λέτε, γιατί είμαι υποχρεωμένος να το κρατήσω απόρριτο.
Οκ, καταλαβαίνω. Ευχαριστώ.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
So to be clear, when we're speaking, Mr. Pappas, I will be asking you the questions and you will be giving me the answers.
Λοιπόν, για να είμαι σαφής, καθώς θα μιλάμε, κύριε Πάπα, εγώ θα κάνω τις ερωτήσεις και εσείς θα μου δίνετε τις απαντήσεις.
Οκ, εντάξει.
Okay.
Introductions are a valuable opportunity to establish an initial rapport between the client, clinician, and interpreter. The clinician should be the first to speak and should address the client in English. Prior to beginning the assessment, the clinician should introduce themselves before introducing the interpreter. They should then identify their respective roles. It's important that the client knows that the clinician will lead the interaction. After interpreting the clinician's opening introductions, the interpreter should then explain their own role to the client and how they will be interpreting. The interpreter should also ensure the client understands how to use an interpreter.
Okay, I hope that was helpful. We have more training, obviously, as that goes along. So when you complete this module, which is really the heart of our training, hopefully interpreters will come away understanding the requirements and limitations of the role they're fulfilling, manage the expectations that clients may have, and in some ways also manage the expectations that clinicians may have. In this session, we emphasize that the interpreter's role is really to act as a facilitator for the clinician to elicit information from the client. So it is much more than just simply interpreting from one language to the other. It's about ensuring that the patient and the clinician are linguistically present so that they can effectively communicate with each other, but obviously also being aware that the assessment is led by the clinician. It's about attuning the clinician to key features of the client's speech that might indicate either linguistic coherence or discord, about communicating tactfully during interactions, conveying key features of the speech, such as disordered speech or mumbling, or if your patient gets frustrated or aggressive, but also attending to non-verbal and contextual features of the interaction that might actually signal that they are not necessarily cognitively impaired. Ultimately, that's a decision for the clinician to make, but providing that contextual detail is very important. So as an example, if you if the clinician said to the patient, could you please list for me all the as many fruits or as many things as you can think of starting with the letter F, right? But then the client responds in their language when maybe there is nothing equivalent to the letter F in their language. Maybe they're listing other things, but it is coherent and it is contextually relevant to the query the clinician asked. It is incumbent on the interpreter to communicate that back to the clinician. Likewise, if there are paralinguistic markers indicating that the patient is struggling in some respect, it's also incumbent on the interpreter to communicate that back. So in many ways, we are trying, I guess, here to recognize the really vital role that interpreters are playing beyond just, from mediating from one language to the other, that you're also conveying very important cultural information in that process. Clinicians have told us that this is something they value very much when they use interpreters to help them in their work. So like I said, we're looking at the fundamental aspects of speech. So what is the patient, what is the clinician saying? And then also how are they saying it in terms of the intent? One of the things that we have done in our training is we've included opportunities for interpreters to practice in a few languages. So I'm sorry, we don't have this available in all the languages, but we have a few practice videos in 6 relatively common languages. These are Arabic, Mandarin, Cantonese, Vietnamese, Greek, and Italian. I'm going to show you a little video here again of what the practice looks like. And we've put pauses in place to, I guess, help break up the frequency of the interpreting. Of course, you may disregard these pauses when you do it yourself. It's just an indicator. I also wanted to flag it because when you see the video, it looks like there's a lot of stopping and starting, but that's just recognizing that we need a break to allow that space for the interpreting to occur. In this session, just to give you some context, we've got Dina here, who you can see in the blue shirt. Dina is actually a geriatrician at the Royal Melbourne Hospital in Melbourne, and she regularly undertakes cognitive assessments. And she was on our study and advising us as well as one of the chief investigators. And here she is undertaking a cognitive assessment with a person who speaks Vietnamese. This is an actor, it's not a real patient. So, but it's just a good opportunity to have a practice and for you to get a sense of what we would like, how you can improve your own practice. So I'll play it and you can see it.
Standing on the side of a busy street. There's no pedestrian crossing and no traffic lights. Uh-oh. Tell me what you would do to get across to the other side of the street safely.
I see the car.
Ah, yes, it's a very busy road.
Tiếng Anh phải nói như thế nào? Hãy quan sát xe hơi cả hai phía trước khi sang đường.
Yes.
So we'll stop there. What I hope you could see from that interaction is, I hope, common things that might arise in everyday practice. Your patient is responding in a way that might be coherent. So there is a busy road. She's being asked to cross it. What does she do? She says she sees a car, right? That might indicate both what I said, context and intent. Then she goes on to say other things. The interpreting session does explain what she's doing. But also what we have included in this session is a bit of side talk, where she gets confused, the patient is confused. where they might get upset with the questions that are being asked. And so there's a variety of different scenarios to practice in. So there's a scenario where the patient is like a model patient. They answer all the questions and it goes very smoothly, hopefully. But then there's also these other challenges that quite often can arise. Finally, Module 5 talks about the AUSIT Code of Ethics. But we don't reiterate the code because many interpreters are already very familiar with the code. So it's not a matter of restating what is already known. It is about applying that code of ethics to interpreting for cognitive assessments and some of the challenges that might arise in a cognitive assessment and how that can be navigated. So we want you to sort of address those ethical dilemmas. So what might happen, for example, when the family member intercedes and says, look, I don't want the interpreter here. I can do it for my mom or dad. You can leave. Thanks very much. All right. Or when the patient themselves says, well, I know you socially and I don't want you doing this session. You need to go. Or what happens, which has happened to some interpreters, we've certainly in our studies encountered this, when the clinician might say to them, okay, John, can you please explain to the patient and the family why we're here today? When in fact, they haven't explained to the patient and the family why they're here today. They're not leading that encounter. They're asking the interpreter to lead it. Or even worse, sometimes when we've heard of clinicians saying, John, you and I have worked together. We've done a number of cognitive assessments. You know what the RODAS is like. Can you just ask the questions, please? You go ahead and lead that. You just ask it. Don't worry about me. I'll sit back. That's not ethical. And this is where the code of ethics comes in and helps navigate those very challenging professional situations and being very clear about some of the roles and scope of practice. So we also talk about, in terms of the ethical principles here, about relating to accuracy. So also when you are communicating, about remaining faithful to the meaning of the text and the messages, including, I guess, the emotional tone of the speakers in their interpreting, and not to soften it or enhance it in certain ways. Sometimes in interpreting, I know there are conflicting models. Right? There's a helper model. We want to help and support the patient and be an advocate. And sometimes we have to be a mediator. And in a cognitive assessment, it's really important not to step into that kind of helper model, but really to communicate that there is incoherence or hesitation, there's lack of clarity, to make sure that tone is communicated back to the clinician, because that is really important information in making a proper diagnosis for someone with dementia. So I'll be finishing very soon, and then we can have I've left lots of space for us to engage with each other and ask questions. I think we learn more from each other like that. So that will be very exciting, and I'm really looking forward to that session. If you do want to access the full mindset training, please use the QR code here or the link as well. This is available for free on the Nati Learn portal. So I would strongly encourage you to access it. I would also let you know that you are eligible to claim up to 20 PD points under category 1.3 or 2.20, but not both. So please don't double dip for completing the training. We did advertise this training quite a lot, but about 2 years ago, so it might have turned up in your social media feed or through your Nati newsletter or through the newsletters from 2M. They were also great supporters of the training. I just wanted to close in some ways with this quote from Erica, who used to be, I think she's, again, once more the president of AUSIT. but she's been long affiliated with OSIT, and she encourages us all to complete the training as well. So with that, I'm going to close, but before I sort of stop and start taking questions, I wanted to close with a little bit of a reflection, which is that we are an aging society. We are a multilingual, multicultural society. More people in our communities will experience dementia. What you do in that cognitive assessment is really, really important. Let me just put it in context. Our communities experience delayed diagnosis for a variety of reasons. If you speak a language other than English in Australia, it takes about 70 days, 70 days, from when you present with your symptoms to the doctor to when you actually get diagnosed. If you speak English, it takes 18 days, 1/8. It's a very big difference. And when you have dementia, early diagnosis is very important. It enables the person to plan their life, to think about how they want to live. And it enables their family to come to terms with it. And people can live for many years with dementia. They can have a good quality of life. But if we delay and delay and delay, then it means that when diagnosis eventually happens, there's less options available for our people, right? So I think that's why it's very important when you come to that cognitive assessment to understand this bigger context that is around it, and to know, therefore, that the role that you are performing in that assessment is critical to going away to closing some of that gap. So I'm going to leave it at that and then open it up to questions. I can see there are lots of questions coming in the chat, and I'm really looking forward to answering some of those questions. Back to you, Despina.
Thank you so much, Bianca. Fantastic. I think we're all shocked by the difference in terms of days for diagnosis, right? You left us with that, and we're all wondering, what does it mean really and why that is? So maybe we start from there and then we go to the more specific questions. Thank you.
Sure. Delay in diagnosis or the diagnostic gap is because for several reasons. One is in many ethnically diverse families, we don't have enough information about dementia in different languages. So the families and people often postpone getting a diagnosis or going to the doctor until the symptoms are very, very acute, right? So that's one reason. But it's also when we present, when they go to the doctor, and they're there, getting initially GPs and doctors to take the symptoms seriously, not to dismiss it as normal aging, is a barrier. Making sure an interpreter can be found to support that interaction. Sometimes health services struggle to do that, and there's a bit of a delay in doing that. Availing of certain pathological tests and imaging. So quite often as part of the diagnostic process, you do a cognitive assessment, but you might also do history taking. Often they'll take some bloods, and they might even do a PET scan or an MRI as well. So if you're doing all of those things, it can take more time, especially if the person doesn't speak English and they need to navigate the health system. Because if you just get written a referral letter and told, well, please go get an MRI and come back, it is much harder if you don't speak English to then find to get someone to help you navigate all of that process. And oftentimes people rely on family members to do it and to take them to appointments, etc. Family members are often younger, they're working, they've got children of their own, lots of commitments. And so all of these reasons tend to blow out the time to diagnosis.
Thank you. So the lucky few get a professional interpreter, and here is where this program, its benefit becomes very evident. There aren't enough of us, there aren't enough interpreters to go around for all health assessments, including dementia or cognitive assessments in any language at any time, right? So we're trying to enhance, to augment the pool of professional interpreters, because when we do present, as you mentioned, generally speaking or theoretically, the outcomes could be a lot better for all involved, for the session, obviously, communicatively, but also for the patient and extended to their families. And so if we go back to the word dementia in other languages other than English, which is very often, as you mentioned, pejorative, right? Has a negative connotation to it. How are we supposed to render the word? We, as interpreters, we cannot change the meaning of the word, but we cannot also use a different term because it would not resonate with the cult patient.
So I would recommend in situations like that to describe some of the symptoms rather than, and maybe even just use the English term dementia rather than a corollary in the native language or in the non-English language, if that corollary is pejorative. So just as an example, I speak Hindi from India. I might say to the patient, yadash ke bimari, or, something like that, which is the disease of memory. Okay, we're coming to see if you have a disease of memory, but there might be other symptoms also that are presenting. What I wouldn't want to say, which is something that the patient might be most familiar with, is the word pagal, which means mad, right? That's the most familiar word. They will understand that word immediately. But we don't want someone to come into a cognitive assessment and for the interpreter to say, we're here to see if you're mad. It's not going to work.
Yeah.
So I would recommend handling it like that if possible.
Well, great. That's a great way of doing it. But the interpreter is not the conductor, so to speak. We're not the conductors of the session, right?
Yeah.
And obviously, the English speaker clinician might not be familiar without the word and its connotations in every other language. So what happens there?
So that's where you might say to the clinician in advance, for example, if you're a Greek interpreter, look, the word that we use in Greek for dementia is, sorry about my pronunciation, it is avio. Now, if that literally translates as madness, then again, it's going to derail your interaction. So you might say to the clinician, I'm not going to use that word because it will just set us on the wrong path. Maybe you'll just use the word dementia. And then say, we're here to see if you have dementia, and the clinician might say, we understand you've got concerns about your memory, or, you're worried about your cognition, or maybe your brain health or something like that.
Great, thank you. I think Ukrainian interpreters are really lucky like this because the word is dementia, so it's the same word. For Greek community, they are very familiar with the word Alzheimer's, which is one form of dementia, which would be preferable to use rather than forgetfulness, right? Because forgetfulness is not really a correct rendering, because forgetfulness can be other things. Is that right?
That is correct. And forgetfulness is very challenging because, we see people will say, oh, I'm so forgetful. I don't remember what I ate for breakfast. I can't remember where I put my keys. Where is my mobile phone? That's normal forgetfulness. I don't know what I ate for breakfast today. I've forgotten. And, I'm always lost with my keys and all of those things. So that doesn't mean that you have dementia. That is just cognitive load and the busyness of life We all forget these small things. It's not a big deal. And you certainly wouldn't go for a cognitive assessment for that. So there's much more than just forgetfulness happening by the time you're presenting for a cognitive assessment.
Interesting. And a lot of experienced interpreters in the chat, they say that a lot of families as well prefer not to mention the word and agree beforehand on a term to use. And also, for Greek people, they do understand the word as a condition, so they don't really get offended, which is a good thing. It's very interesting because language does color, meaning. It does have this ability, this great ability. So, in terms of the cognitive assessment, one interpreter is asking, they always ask this question, and I don't know the answer myself in terms of the test. I'm not sure exactly to what she is referring, what is the correct answer to give. Is there a set of correct answers for the cognitive assessment, the Rudess cognitive assessment, or?
There are correct answers to certain things, but a cognitive assessment is not just testing things like your knowledge. It'll also be testing basic instructions. Can you put your left hand on your right shoulder? I can't. Pick up my right hand and put it on my left shoulder. What would you do if you had to cross the road? How would you draw certain things? There's a whole different suite of cognitive tests that can be used. It's important to note that not all cognitive tests are culturally fair. Some are culturally unfair. They discriminate against people who might have less literacy, and it can generate a false positive or even a false negative in the test result. The mini mental state examination, which many of you might have had to interpret for through your career, is actually a culturally very unfair tool. It asks a lot of questions that are not, that do discriminate. So, ask things like dates and times that not everybody is aware of. And we forget that. And so sometimes patients you might say, well, what's the date today? And they don't know the date, but then they might be able to orient themselves to time and place in other ways, which would be helpful. So, they may not be able to say, all right, today is, the 31st of March, for example, 2026, but they'll say, okay, it's Easter time, or it's springtime, or it's autumn, or I'm going to plant this in my garden now. And all of those things do provide some orientation to time and place, which is important to communicate back to the clinician, because strictly speaking on the question, they haven't answered the question. But again, as I said, through intent and content of what they've said, they have actually answered it. So it's not an examination of right, wrong. It's also about the clinician being enabled to make a judgment.
And interpreters are the key for the clinician to make this judgment, because interpreters are not only the language experts, but the culture experts, right? And the brokers in this case, in this consultation, to enable the clinician to understand how things work in this culture in terms, as you mentioned, maybe time, space, etc. So, but there can be added layers of difficulties to already difficult conversations, such as dementia assessments. And that is a patient that's very proud of their English capacity, that they want to conduct the assessment or the interview in English. However, the interpreter can have a different opinion, or anyone who is expert in both languages. What happens in this situation?
So in this situation, it's really critical. And we actually cover this in our training video, where, what happens in that. So we say in those situations, the interpreter can say to the patient, the clinician and the hospital or the service has asked me to be here today to help them in their work. And that is why I am here. And so if you would like me to leave, you need to ask the clinician to do that. But oftentimes you can explain to the clinician, look, the patient feels they speak English very well. They don't want me here. They want me to leave, or they want to talk to you directly. So you can say that, and then it's up to the clinician in some ways to mediate that tension. Some clinicians will do it well. Most will not, to be honest with you, because like I said at the start, they themselves are not trained. And this is quite an advanced communication that needs to happen, for a cognitive assessment, because there are so many things going on. It's not just about a simple form-filling exercise. You're making an assessment about somebody's capacity. You're navigating language, culture, the stress that someone may not, in fact, have capacity, and their own anxiety about not having capacity. So there's a lot going on in those interactions.
It's great for us to see, though, that you are fully aware of these difficulties, the added difficulties when the encounter is mediated by an interpreter, right? So hopefully, and through the work you do, this can be passed on to other researchers and clinicians, because we need all to work together for this kind of assessment to have the desired outcome. The onus is not only on the interpreter. The onus is never only on the interpreter solely, right? But although it is the experience sometimes that clinicians think that it is the interpreter that is not able or competent, therefore the outcome is not what they hoped for. So, but okay, the question is when it is crossing the road, what is the correct answer if one exists?
I feel like saying it's the chicken. Why did the chicken cross the road? But I mean, it's about looking both ways and things like that. If I might come back to some of the other points you made, Despina, when clinicians are confident and the interaction goes well, a diagnosis can be facilitated more quickly. When clinicians are not confident about the assessment, the default is they tend to have order a hospital stay, often for the patient. And we did some research. So this is not just in dementia, this is broadly. Patients will stay 3 days longer in hospital. More pathology and more imaging is ordered, which is all together much more expensive and invasive. So, there is a lot at stake if it doesn't go right. The final thing I'd like to say is, while I have spent this session talking about the challenges, acknowledging the difficulties, acknowledging that training must be both on the side of clinician and interpreters, I would like to tell everybody that in Australia, you, interpreter workforce, you are at the forefront of this kind of awareness and training and skills building. This kind of work is not being done anywhere else in the world. It's really being led from Australia. And in my next session, I can talk more about where it's gone to next. But I really wanted to emphasize that, and that the uptake of our training, even to date, has really been a reflection of, I think, the professionalism of the sector and the desire to upskill and actually meet the challenges associated with an aging and diverse, ethnically diverse population. So, if you take nothing else away, take away the message that you are all doing well.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. We're really grateful to hear. Although there's a lot more we could be discussing around the appropriateness of the remote interpreting mode for such type of assessments and the culturally adapted cognitive tests that were mentioned briefly. We might have the opportunity at the next webinar, which is coming up on the 4th of March. But our time for today has finished. We really thank you so much, Bianca, for presenting all this very important topic and giving us all this extra information. I think you've opened our eyes to many things, certainly my eyes. So, and if I judge from the chat, there's a lot of gratefulness, and thank you so much for the comprehensive and the informative session. Very helpful, very interesting. So stay tuned for more. Join us again on the 4th of March with Professor Bianca Brijnath. Thank you again. You have a good rest of your evening. And thank you to our Auslan interpreter as well.